Let's give her a round of applause. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, I'm wide. Okay, can everyone hear me okay? I'm really not used to having one of these. I'm used to projecting my voice far away. I hope I don't look the way I feel. I feel very melted at the moment. But we'll all melt together, right? We're all melting together. All right, well, hello everyone. My name is Barbara Greenbush, and I am here tonight on behalf of the Camp Pendleton Historical Society. And our president, Mr. Richard Rockwell, just happens to sit right in the front row, so you can watch me this whole time. But I'll talk a little bit more about our society here towards the end, and if you have any more questions and whatnot, you're welcome to come forward and ask either one of us. Okay. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about, or I'm going to introduce and share some of my favorite stuff, and that's Camp Pendleton. And that's also the ranch house and all that wonderful stuff that's on Camp Pendleton. Okay, so tonight we're actually going to be talking about, it did not go next. There we go. Tonight we're going to be talking about what we like to call the land that Camp Pendleton obviously is, how it became a Marine Corps base. Alrighty? So it's really three stories that go into this, to the making of this. Of course, we have the land that we talked about, and that's that beautiful rolling green hills that you get to drive through there on the 5 freeway when you're doing the speed limit all the way through, right? And thank goodness that it looks that way, and thank goodness that the Marines came, because it wouldn't look that way if they hadn't all those years ago, right? So that's the second part, of course, and together they make one of our favorite things, and that is they make Camp Pendleton itself. Alrighty? So now let's look a little bit. And how I'm going to do this tonight is I'm going to talk here about Camp Pendleton, and of course the minute you hear Camp Pendleton, you think of the Marines, you think of this large amphibious base that's there. You think of how long has it been there? How many people are stationed there? There's so many things, especially if you don't have any military affiliation either. You think about how it got there, right? But from kind of a more distant perspective, we're going to just look a little bit about this latest chapter, okay? I have divided it for you really in 4 different chapters. The first one, of course, that we were just talking about, or Rebecca was just mentioning it, of course, is what we call the Native American or maybe the Indian time. And of course, they've been here for thousands of years before us. Also on Camp Pendleton and that whole area. And I'm going to show you a map, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. But of course, I start with that one, and especially we're going to end that one when the Mission San Luis Rey came in, and that was about 1798. And we're also going to talk about the Mission San Luis Rey and just how large it was and how it changed the Native Americans. And then we're also going to talk about one of my favorite eras, and that's the Rancho era. It lasted for about 100 years until, in our area, until the Marines came aboard in 1942. So it's almost like it was a Camelot kind of a time frame in that 100 years of the dawns and riding the horses, and you guys are horse people out this way too, right? So, and then we're of course going to talk about how the Marines came into play, okay? How they came there, how it became this huge amphibious base. So let's go ahead and get started. We were just talking about how beautiful that green land is there as you're driving up the 5 freeway. And it's so wonderful that it's not really spoiled or touched, and there aren't houses and things on there. The Marines are very good stewards of the land that they are occupying now. And I really believe that if some of the family members that lived there hundreds of years ago came back, they could walk among those hills and in those canyons, and it would still be familiar to them because they haven't been overproduced with houses and things like that. So we're going to look a little bit into the Native Americans here in our area on Camp Pendleton. Everyone understands that map a little bit. You can see down here where Oceanside is, and there up above there you see San Juan Capistrano as well. So the Oshawott Indians were in that area, which is right, if you drive by the 5 freeway, you drive by the Las Pontas exit. That was their whole area was up there. And what's kind of fun too is we all know Oshawott stands really for Little Rose. And when the Spanish went through there, we'll talk about that later, but they actually called it Las Flores, right, for all the flowers and whatnot that were there too. And then the Topamai were just a little bit further inland by the Santa Margarita River as well. And what's really funny about Topamai, it really means like a grinder, or it was really means like what is it called? Like a grinding stone, I guess. It's loosely translated into grinding stone, really. And what's funny about it too is the Marines now, the parade deck that they always are traipsing all the time, they call it a grinder. So I think that's kind of funny that I don't even know if they meant to do that or not, but it definitely happened there. So there were 2 significant Native American tribes or families that were living there. And we just passed over the 249th year that Portola came walking through our area. Next year we're going to hopefully do some kind of a big special thing because it'll be 250 years. But on July 20th, he walked through the area, walking up towards Monterey, right? That's what they were trying to find with that 240-year-old map that they had given him. And so he passed over the river in that area, and it just happened to be the feast day of Santa Margarita, so they named it the Santa Margarita River at that time. They continued up, of course, up the coast towards, if you're familiar with that area, the San Clemente area up there. And that's where the 2 Franciscan monks did the first baptism of a Native American. There's 2 females, 2 babies up there. So it's we now call it Christianitos, which is up there as well. And you can visit that area too. Now, when Mission San Luis Rey came into being at that time, of course, just like Rebecca, you were referring to, how they were taking the Indians and doing what they needed to do and training them to be all these wonderful things at that time too. Mission San Luis Rey, the area that they used was huge. I don't even know if you can call it an umbrella. It was like huge. It was 950,000 square miles. It went all the way up to Warner Springs, all the way down, to San Diego, and all the way up. So just imagine how large that was, and how do you even keep control of that? How do you know what's on it? So what the Spanish did was they actually broke it into ranches. And when they did that, then they could kind of know what's in certain areas and who's involved in this and who's involved in that. But all the way past to Fallbrook, even Temecula was part of this Mission San Luis Rey. So that's a lot of ground when you think about that all the way around. So following, of course, the successful Mexican Revolution in 1821, there was now this goal that Mexico wanted to do, as we know, is they want to kind of power down what Spain is doing, right? So they also felt that they were mistreating the Native Americans and the Indians and all of that too. So they, of course, tried to do this upheaval, and they did get rid of the Spanish, which they did in 1833. They were able to come in and take care of those missions and get the Spanish out of there, okay? So now they have all of this land, and they have all of these Native Americans and these Indians that now, what do we do with all of this? If we get rid of the missions, we're also getting rid of a lot of income, because they were working the land, they were making a lot of money. So now what do? We need someone to take care of the land, and I believe still take care and watch the Native Americans and what they were doing. So what happened after that was these 2 men came into the picture, the Pico brothers, Pio Pico and Andres Pico, and Mr. Alvarado, the Governor Alvarado, does that sound familiar to everyone, right? What he did was he made the administrators out of the mission, San Luis Rey. So this way they could still keep in track of all the Indians out there. They still knew what was being harvested. They could still treat them maybe not so nice, but they still kept doing what they needed to do. Alrighty? And then what Alvarado did was he actually granted them the title and gave them land to the Santa Margarita, which is now what is Camp Pendleton. So at that time, they granted them 133,000 acres, and you're familiar with the map that's up there. You can see where Oceanside is, up all the way up there to San Clemente, and all the way up. And once he did this, this was now one of the largest ranches in California.
Was Pio Pico the same one in Los Angeles?
Pio Pico, Pico Boulevard, all of that, they own quite a bit of land and houses up in Los Angeles as well. Yeah. So the name is very familiar, right? So with some things that were going on, and we will say maybe some not so good investment deals that Pio Pico made and things of that sort, they built a small 2-room little house on there on this land, but they ended up having to sell the property just due to, like I said, financial issues and things of that sort. So they actually sold it to this gentleman, John Forrester. So now John Forrester has come over from Liverpool, England, and made his way up the coast of California. He was dropped off in San Diego to help his uncle run a shipping business. So he then makes his way up and starts making money and starts doing the things that he needed to do. He arrived in Los Angeles, and right as the whole mission secularization was going on, so he was in a really good spot as well to start purchasing some land and all of that too. But the thing at this time was, if you wanted to purchase land here in California, you had to become a Mexican citizen, and you also had to convert to, well, you had to become a Catholic. So in order to do all of that, in order to own land in California, that was very important to do. And once he did that, he also then started to court Pio Pico and Andres Pico, little sister, Isadora Pico. Now she was a pretty sought after, she's kind of gorgeous, isn't she? She was a sought after young lady because she's coming from a very well-to-do family. And you know, she never spoke any English because of course that to her is the heathen language. Because everyone's taking everything from her. It makes complete sense. But then she marries an Englishman. But anyway, that's okay. I guess he just had that swagger. I don't know. But at this time now, he is purchasing or being granted huge tracts of land in Orange County. Okay? So, and now he's also, because he came in right when they were doing the secularization of the missions, he purchased Mission San Juan Capistrano. He lived in Mission San Juan Capistrano, which I think just sounds so funny to me. You know, you live where the monks lived and everything. So now things are going great for him and his wife. They have 6 children and everything is going really well. So now John Forrester, as we know him now, is Don Juan Forrester because he's coming up in society. He's become a Mexican citizen. He's Catholic. Everything's going well. And remember now, too, he is the brother-in-law to Pio Pico and Andres Pico, okay? So he went ahead and purchased the land, the 133,000 acres, from his brother-in-laws and helped them with their debt, get rid of their debt. So now he owns that. So that puts him well over 200,000 acres of land from Orange County all the way down past Oceanside in that area down there. We're talking Mission Viejo, all of that area belongs now to him. He built himself a little ranch house up there and started some grapevines, all of that as well, to take care of everything that's going on. Unfortunately, in the 1860s, I know you guys know your history, there was, believe it or not, a horrible drought in the area, okay? But in those days, you couldn't just take water and stuff out to your horses. I mean, they were just dropping out in the pasture. It was just a horrible thing. Also, for poor Don Juan Forrester, the fencing laws came in too. So there's that fencing law between the farmers and the ranchers, and the farmers said you need to keep in all of your free grazing animals. So there's no way you can afford to do that. So now they needed to sell the ranch. There just wasn't any way that they could get out of it. So in comes Richard O'Neill. Okay, now if the name O'Neill sounds familiar to you, they're still living up in Mission Viejo and all of that area, so that's the O'Neill family up there as well. You'll see O'Neill Park and all these things. So, yeah. So here's another Irishman here. He was born in County Cork in Ireland. Came over before the potato famine, so don't worry about that. He, of course, came to California, like so many other at the time, hoping to just pull those huge chunks of gold out of the rivers and just walk away with their fortune. But like so many of them found out, that didn't really work, right? So things weren't going well for him at that. So what he did was he became a butcher. The same thing that his grandfather was, that his father was a butcher. So he went back to that, and because he was a butcher up in San Francisco, he met a lot of people, and he knew where all the cattle were, and he knew where all the ranches were, because he would go purchase them and bring them up, and then that's where they would get their meat and whatnot up there. And so he's perfect for owning a ranch, because he's the guy right there. But unfortunately, he doesn't have enough money to buy a ranch. Well, he has an absolutely great friend by the name of James C. Flood. I don't know if that name sounds familiar or not, but he went into, it was called the Comstock Lode, the world's largest silver find ever in Nevada. And one of his business partners up there was Mr. Hearst. So, so this gentleman here became one of the richest men overnight because of that Comstock one. Okay, so he's friends with Richard O'Neill. So Richard O'Neill and him were very smart. Richard O'Neill went down and said, I will purchase the ranch at the price you're asking, and I will take good care of it. And he had this silent partner financing it. And Mr. Flood said, of course, don't tell them I'm going to finance it because I think the price will go up. Let's just keep it. We'll just do everything in your name. So sure enough, they did. It was fantastic. I mean, this was like one of the best deals ever. So they went ahead and did that. It's great for Mr. Flood because he wants to now diversify some of his holdings, right? And it's all the prestige of owning land in California as well. So he buys it, and believe it or not, they honestly shake hands and say to each other, in 20 years, if you are managing this ranch and it's going great, we'll just have the whole thing between you and I. Handshake. No written agreement anywhere. Can you imagine that nonsense, huh? Judge Judy would have a connection fit for sure. So they did it. It was the best agreement you can imagine. So now, Mr. O'Neill now gets the ranch house that we're seeing here. And so he is going to now begin managing this ranch, and he does a wonderful job at it. Don't worry about Mr. Flood, though, okay? He stayed in one of his modest homes up in San Francisco, and he wasn't hurting at all. If you need more information about the Flood family, just Google Flood San Francisco. So, not only was that a wonderful thing that they did, it was fantastic because his son, James L. Flood, or James Jr., came into the picture as well after his father passed away. And they, of course, him and Richard O'Neill's son, Jerome O'Neill, knew that their dads had made this bet, and so they honored it as well. And they continued going on, and he managed the ranch And the Flood family would come down every once in a while in their personal rail car and visit them and whatnot on their personal railroad. Right? So now they did this, they managed this together. Well, it was more the O'Neill family. Jerome O'Neill never married. He was kind of married to the ranch, if that's what you'd like to say. So this went on to about 1926. You see anything up there in common with those two men? They literally passed away from each other 2 days apart in 1926. So now the family's going, what do we do with the ranch? Right? So what they did with the ranch was they kind of put it into a hold. The bank is now going to hold on to it. And we're going to see what we're going to do with it. So we're going to pause on that for just 1 second on that track. And now we're going to look at the Marines and see what they were doing during this time, because they were messing around in Southern California a lot earlier than I think you guys think, all right? So now, of course, when we talk about the Marines and we talk about this, we think about, oh, the Marines, right? First to fight, they get out there and they, they're ambitious and they're aggressive and all these things. But what's kind of fun about this part is when it comes to Camp Pendleton, they were really more what we call a tail-end Charlie. Kind of the slower one, trying to keep up with everyone. And what's kind of crazy about it is they could not make up their mind if they wanted to purchase or take Camp Pendleton as their own. Now at this time as well, there was a gentleman named Lieutenant Archibald Gillespie. Gillespie Field, that sounds familiar to anyone as well. They were here earlier in the 1900s, and he pretty much came here as kind of I guess you could say a spy almost, or at that time was President Polk. He was checking out the area because Mexico is rumbling down here, and America's up here, so they're kind of afraid something's going to start happening between Mexico and America and California and all of that. And he spoke fluent Spanish, so he could intermix and kind of find out what's going on as well. Well, war did break out, as we all know, the Mexican-American War. He did stay on, and he did help fight that war. He was involved in the Battle of San Pascual, along with Andres Pico. He was there too. And the Marines were actually involved in this as well. He led a few Marines, which you don't hear about really a whole lot. Probably the first time tonight, right? I don't know if it's because maybe there just weren't as many Marines, or I don't want to say they didn't win the battle. Some people say the Californios won that one instead. But as we all know, what happened to that, California after this became the 31st state. So it looks like California's won. So at this time, in 1911, up in North Island, the Marines start a Camp Thomas, it's called. And they were there because of Mexico rumbling around. And it's kind of funny, you might be a little surprised to hear that we were dealing with the border with Mexico way back in 1911, as we are now. But then it was just purely almost like banditry. They were coming up doing things they shouldn't and all that. It wasn't about immigration back then. So the Marines came up. They formed on a Camp Thomas, and what's fun too is all of their tent openings faced Mexico. That's how they were threatening them. Gosh darn it. And not only that, they had some ships that went down the west coast, and the Marines would go into Mexico on the west coast and do some port calls and stuff like that. So believe it or not, after that, nothing happened. Everything kind of calmed down after that. So a few years later, about 3 years later, San Diego was looking into having and hosting the Panama Exposition. This is where we get our Balboa Park from and all of that. All those buildings you see there were only supposed to stand and live for about, I think it was 5 years. And they're still standing today, which is just unbelievable. San Diego at the time had about 35,000 people. And they're hoping that this exposition here at Balboa Park is going to pull in interested people that want to buy land, that want to live there, that want to become a part of their, the civic duties. So what they did was they were a little afraid still that some hooligans might come in there from somewhere and start doing some things, especially in this large gathering like this. So what they did was they contacted a Colonel Joseph H. Pendleton at that time. And what he did was he was the regimental commander that brought in some Marines. This gentleman had over 32 years of experience by the time in 1911. And he had a lot behind him to come in and make sure that nothing's going to go wrong for this exposition. Everyone loved him so much, they actually called him Uncle Joe because he was just such a nice, pleasurable man, a smart man. So he came in there, and what he initially did was he set up on North Island a Camp Howard. And I don't know how well you can see that, but it's actually up front here on one of the horses as well. But after a while he realized, well, this isn't working out so well. They're way over here, everyone's way over there. So, I know what we'll do. We'll go ahead and we'll just station the Marines in Balboa Park. So the Marines were actually in Balboa Park. And they would have their parades there. Look at this one. They would have free entertainment by watching the Marines do all their different calisthenics and train and all of this sort of stuff. And they could also watch them have their beautiful parades up and down in that area. All at the same time, they're making sure that Mexico's not rising again, not doing something, and they just kind of have that presence that's there that I think really helped. Now, Colonel Pendleton was very much a visionary, and he really wanted a permanent base down in San Diego somewhere. So he did talk to the Chamber of Commerce, and he did do everything they needed to do, and they actually did get a base down in San Diego. And this is, as you see it here, it probably doesn't look familiar to anyone, but this is what we now call the Marine Corps Recruit Depot in San Diego. So what they did at this time was, it's a perfect area, except for they started filling in some of that swamp, they started making a little more ground, and they built it out, and now you have Marine Corps Recruit Depot down in San Diego. So this now is the perfect location because you have to remember, right at that same time, the Panama Canal had opened up. So now we have a presence way down south that's close in case anything happens down in that area. So it was a perfect place to be. The 4th Marine Regiment came in and stayed there on the base, and they were there just in case anything was to go wrong. I believe they had as many as 3,000 to 4,000 Marines stationed there at one time on this base. So they're training and they are doing everything the Marines love to do down there, but now they're running out of land because people are starting to come to San Diego. And the land is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And they can't shoot off their cannons and such, and they can't run around and do those wonderful things they do. And now we're starting to push into World War II is starting to happen. 1939, as we know as well, Germany had attacked Poland. All of these things were happening over there, but as we know as our history, America was staying a little reserved, right? Wasn't going in there yet. And the Marines continued to train down in San Diego. In steps this gentleman right here with these wonderful acronyms up top if you're not familiar with any of that lingo. Commanding General, Fleet Marine Forces, San Diego. Okay? This gentleman is down here. This is Major General Clifton B. Vogel. He came in to really find some new training areas in Southern California because remember they're running out of land. So this gentleman comes out and he starts looking all around Southern California. Kearney Mesa looked fantastic because there's tons of land out there. Alrighty? So as they're looking at this, marching around, looking, they looked at Camp Pendleton, well, what we now call Camp Pendleton. They looked at Santa Margarita Ranch 2 times in 1939 and 1940. Remember tail-end Charlie? No, we can't make a decision yet, don't know what to do. And he said, and plus, it's 50 miles from our permanent base down in San Diego. That's too far away. Well, they can't be that far away. So while all of this is going on and the Marines can't make up their mind, the Army goes, maybe we would like this land. This is perfect. We too need to train. But as soon as they got out there, their army and the canyons and the gullies were too much. They couldn't do it. So they said, no, no, we just can't go through all this land with all our stuff. It just won't work for us. Just not at all. Okay? Just think it could have been an army base. I don't know if anyone in here was in the army. I'm sorry, but sorry. But we are so glad it's a Marine base. Let me just put it there. All right. Well, then that unfateful day, December 7th, 1941 happens, and Pearl Harbor, as we know, is attacked. And all of these things are going on within the Marine Corps and, of course, within the government, saying, wait a minute, maybe we do need more of a presence on the West Coast. I mean, jeepers, Japan is just across the Pacific. They're sinking ships out there. They're doing all this stuff. They could come to us now. Yeah, but that land up there, Santa Margarita, is like 50 miles away from us. How can we keep in touch with them? Yeah, but you know what's up there, don't you know? This gorgeous 17 miles of beach up there. We could just have an amphibious fun up there, right? Because, they learned in World War I, that was all trench fighting, and that was all that getting down and digging your dirt, This was a different war now. It's amphibious. It's with, so we need somewhere to do this. So they said, yeah, okay, you know what, I think we're going to do that. Let's do that, okay? So in April of 1942, they purchased about, it says there, 125,000 acres for $4.21 million. Alrighty? And during this whole time, too, one of the War Powers Act had taken place as well. And that means that the government can come in and take your home or something like that to help with the war effort, I guess you could say. So this is pretty much what happened. We have our ranch manager, Harry Whitman, that is taking care of Santa Margarita y las Flores, right? Now remember, it was with the banks. This is, was 1926. Now we're talking 1942. So finally now the Marine Corps has purchased it, but poor Harry Whitman did not know that. All right? I'm sure, I don't know what his day was like, but he was probably doing his ranch stuff. And then all of a sudden, on the private railroad that runs through Camp Pendleton, I don't know if you've ever been on there, but it cuts right from the Pacific all the way up. It went all the way up to Fallbrook, all the way up in. So all of a sudden one day, there comes two huge, what the Marines call footlockers, right? Big, huge things, full of stuff, and it says U.S. Navy on there. And I'm sure Harry Whitman was like, these must belong down to San Diego. Someone will get them someday, He probably called, like, hey, to the O'Neill family, to the bank, like everybody, trying to figure out what was going on. Well, a couple days later, this distinguished-looking gentleman steps out, and Major General Joseph Fagan says, well, we're here. This is our land now. We bought it. Oh, and by the way, we bought your house, so I'm going to go ahead and live there. And, it's okay, though. We're going to give you 90 days to sell the herd, to get all those items out of that home, right up there in the ranch, Rancho. And that's where a lot of the cattle also came from up in Mission Viejo, was they were pushed up north from down there at the ranch as well. So they did all of that. And poor Harry Whitman, he felt, I can only imagine what he felt. But what was nice about that was the Marine Corps actually offered him a commission into the Marine Corps as a captain, because he had so much knowledge of how that area worked. He knew where the water was, he knew all the hills and everything. So thank goodness he gladly accepted, and he stayed on, and he became a part of the Oceanside City Council and everything. So it did sound a little rough in the beginning, but it did work out pretty well. So here's what the house looked like in 1942 when the Marines came on board. So now we've got this beautiful rancho. What do we do with it, right? Well, no one wanted to live in it at that time. It's an old house, right? So, someone had said, well, gosh, why don't we just make this into an officers' club? Of course. If you know the Marines, of course they did. So they made a few changes in the house. They knocked down some walls, cut through the adobe, the 4-foot thick adobe walls. They started making some changes up there because at this time we were in a war footing. It was wartime. So these were single Marines that were out here because their families didn't come with them because you weren't stationed here. This was just purely the place to come to. So the Officers Club is going on. All of these things are happening. And unfortunately, you can only imagine some of the thoughts that were going through the mind of the people that lived out in town. This is what's happening to our poor old ranch house. We just know it. There is nothing but wild women and free-flowing whiskey, and it's just horrible, right? What can we do? Well, they made some telephone calls, wrote some, I'm pretty sure, some pretty stern letters, and they went all the way to our Capitol on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And it was definitely looked at very sternly. So, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt came out for the dedication of Camp Pendleton, all right? And, well, he actually came out to name it Camp Pendleton after General Joseph H. Pendleton. Unfortunately, Joseph Pendleton passed away about 6 months before it was named for him. So his wife did come out as well to accept it. Now, remember I talked about this, woo, fun time at the ranch house, right? So President Roosevelt pretty much said, hey, look it, I know we're at war, I know y'all are busy, and I know you need to blow a little steam off, but we really need to take care of this place. Like, this is a part of the history, and so he pretty much said, you need to knock it off, no more of that nonsense. So it did stop. And after that then, too, it became known for the generals, the commanding generals of the base. When they took over Camp Pendleton, they actually got to live in that house. So now they have all this land, and they need to make it into an actual living base for everyone to function on there. So how do we do that? They were still afraid of Japan being able to come and strike us on our shores. So what they did was, the main gate, what they call the main gate, is on the 5 freeway. But if you look where that main gate is compared to what we call main side, it is miles apart. This is what a normal barracks-looking military, I guess, house would look, a barracks. They were what we pretty much called, parade ground style, dressed right, and covered down. They all face the same way. But the scary thing about this is, if someone came in, in an airplane, they could just take them all in one straight line and they were all gone. So that's why, when they constructed Camp Pendleton, they put main side so far away. And if you look at this photo, it might look a little crazy, but one building's over here, another one's over there, and then they had different areas. Area 22, Area 23, and so they were all over so that if they ever were attacked like that, they wouldn't be able to get everyone in one shot. It would take a little time to get around, and that really helped them feel a little bit safer, and it was a little bit smarter. So the good old 9th Marines, they started marching up from a place called Camp Elliott, which was down in by Miramar area. Took them a couple days. Of course, they had to march up. They couldn't get into some big old trucks or nothing, right? Come on up. So upon their arrival, you can imagine, they're dusty, they're thirsty, and they just want to relax. So what they let them do was they said, you know what? They said, you can go ahead go down to the enlisted club and everyone can have a drink of beer and just relax. So they did that. So they went in and they dropped all their gear and they had a great night. I guess you could say a great night. And when they came out in what we'll just refer to as kind of a mental fog, they were greeted along with that pea soup kind of fog that likes to just kind of crawl in over the canyons. They didn't know where they were at all. They couldn't find their barracks. They couldn't find anything because they were so disorientated, right? So they pretty much just went into wherever they could find, little building or something. They figured, we'll let the officers sort it out in the morning, right? They got to find us all. So the 9th Marine Regiment was formed there, and they continued on to Guam and Iwo Jima and some of the different places there from Camp Pendleton. Also what was formed was we had the 4th Marine Division that came up there. They went over to Saipan, Tinian, Iwo Jima as well. The 4th Marine Division actually got onto transports there. This is Camp Pendleton. The building you see in the background is what we now use for the Mechanized Museum. This is what it looked like back then in the 40s. The Marines would get onto the rail cars. There's a railroad that runs right behind there, and they would take it down to San Diego, where they would then board the ships that took them over to the Pacific Theater. The 5th Marine Division was also came through Camp Pendleton as well. And of course, we all know the 5th Marine Division is most famous for this wonderful photo here by Joe Rosenthal of the Marines raising the American flag on Suribachi. The 6th Marine Division also came, and they were really kind of quick, streamlined straight into Okinawa. And they did all of their fighting there on the Okinawa, on the island of Okinawa. We also then had the 1st Marine Division. Now the 1st Marine Division, of course, was came over, or was really founded in China and that area, and it didn't return to the States until 1947. And they now are still on Camp Pendleton. This is what their headquarters looks like on Camp Pendleton. We call it the White House. And the Marines from 1st Marine Division have been deploying, as you well know, all over the world, in the mountains in Korea, all the way to the jungles of Vietnam, the deserts of Kuwait, the poppy fields of Afghanistan, all the way to the deadly streets of Iraq cities. This is where all the Marines come from, this 1st Marine Division. And they've been answering the call ever since then. So that's really the end of that presentation for you guys. That kind of tells the story a little bit about the land and who the families were that were there, and how the Marines came and purchased it and came together as one, and how they're taking care of it. So I have our website up there as well. I just want to make sure everyone knows that we're a 501c3 corporation dedicated to helping the Marines, and the Marine Corps preserve history on Camp Pendleton. It's something that we are sternly believe in. We're all volunteers on there as well, and we help in many different ways to keep that going on Camp Pendleton. And then I was just going to show you some quick, I want you to see how beautiful the ranch house looks now compared to some of those old photos, just so you can kind of go, wow, they're really taking care of it. We still are taking care of it. The chapel is down here, and then on that side over there, we have where all the cowboys lived in their bunkhouse. And then this is a quick picture too of Las Flores. Now Las Flores adobe is something that the Camp Pendleton Historical Society really was instrumental in refurbishing it and bringing it back to where its original state. So I just wanted you to see they're all being taken care of. So did you want to entertain any photos or any questions?
The Irvine brothers, were they neighbors of the Picos in the mid-1800s?
If they were up in Los Angeles, Orange County area, then yes, sir. Yep.
It seems like the same area.
Yep. Yep, and Mr. Forrester bought up that way as well. So then the Irvine brothers were up there as well. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Barbara, you mentioned before the Marines were there that there was 130, ranch land was 133,000 acres.
Yes, sir.
Is it still 133,000 today? Is it
That's pretty much what they purchased back then.
It was about the same.
Yeah, and when the Marines first came on there, they had no way to even make sure that it was all taken care of. So the military police actually rode on horses and rode all the way around to make sure the fence posts were safe, were safe. I would say more, maybe 125,000 acres now, but it's about that. Yes, sir.
My name is Greg Calvary. I'm the curator for the Patterson House Museum in Winchester. We have a relationship with the Forster family.
Not surprised.
Lloyd Patterson married Isabel. Isabel Lorena Forster in 1914. They had two guys with tuberculosis in 1915, and the granddaughter of that marriage still lives in Mission Viejo. I will give this information to you before you leave.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I would love it. Yes, sir.
What's the troops today at Camp?
What's the troops? I'm sorry, sir.
Strength, how many body?
How many do you think we have there? There has got to be, what do you think, sir, about how troop strength on Camp Pendleton? Probably about, that's what I was thinking, about 25 to 30,000 would be a little bit much. We've drawn down a little bit, but it's there's quite a bit there. Yes, ma'am.
My husband and I years ago took a tour of the Rancho and the amphibious museum. Do they still allow that?
Yes, they still allow tours at the ranch house, and you can visit the ranch house, and you can also visit the Las Flores adobe as well. And that mechanized museum that I showed you, you're also welcome to do that. Now, the ranch house and the Las Flores adobe is invitation only, so you have to call the number, and they will pre-approve you to get onto the base and all of that good stuff too. The Marines will handle all of that for you. But you can do it. We have 3 tours a month at the ranch house and 1 a month at Las Flores.
When we did it, not only did we have to make a reservation, we had a guy driving us around in a Jeep, taking us.
It's kind of weird. You're on a Marine Corps base. There's a little bit of security there.
We
You
could
know,
just drive around.
Yeah,
We drove
it's
around.
kind of fun because we're kind of, the ranch house is this hidden area because the Marines took it over, so it is a Marine base. So there's a few rules you'll have to follow if you want to come in and tour that, but it's really easy. Yeah, and it's worth it. I would suggest doing it. The house is approximately 8,500 square feet little, so it's not a small little hacienda whatsoever up there. I know 33 rooms. There's 7 working fireplace places, but there's actually 9, I think, up in there too. So it's a fantastic place to come in and just see the history of Camp Pendleton and to see the commanding generals that live there as well and see how the Marines really are taking care of what they said they would do. It's real important to them. So, yes, sir.
I've talked to Barbara before the presentation, and I will be setting up a tour.
Oh, good.
You guys will come out and visit the ranch house. You'll probably see me there as well. I'm a docent there as well. So, yeah, it's tons of fun. You'll really like it. And Las Flores is also fun to get to know the McGee family there. Jane McGee, the lima bean queen. So she grew over 3,000 acres of lima beans right up to her door. It was unbelievable, but that's what worked there. So there's a lot of history there. And President Roosevelt even went to go visit her, too. So, I mean, there's a lot of good stuff. And they lived there till 1960, was 67 or something crazy, while the Marines were there. So they had a really good working relationship with them, too. So it just goes to show. They still take care of it completely. The Marines do all the time. And if they ever see one of the bison, we have bison out there, too, right? Yeah. If they ever see bison walking out there, everything stops. The Marines stop shelling, they stop shooting, they stop doing everything. Has anyone ever tracked how fast a bison can walk? How slow, I guess you could say? So everything stops until it's safely out of the distance, and then the Marines go ahead being Marines, which is blowing stuff out most of the time.
They also have a very nice golf course there, which I play.
They do
It's
have a
open
good
to the
golf
public.
course. It is open to the public, the Marine, Memorial Marine Golf Course. You should come out and check it out. It's beautiful out there.
My
So
first hole in one.
you'll probably see one of the little bisons out there too. She travels and eats all the grass all the time. Is that it for anyone? Oh, yes, sir.
Do you know what the acreage is of Camp Pendleton today?
I would still say it's about 125,000 is what it's acres now.
The difference between the 133,000 that you may remember from the slide and the 125,000 that is today is that a month before the Marine Corps purchased what is now Camp Pendleton, the Navy went in and bought what is now the Fallbrook Naval Weapons Station Annex. So that's where the difference between those two numbers come.
Yeah.
And it's also all in San Diego County, not the portion that was in
Orange County. Right. So that, I don't know if you heard that, but the difference in that 133 to 125 was the Navy went in and bought that, what is now the Naval Weapons Station there by Fallbrook. So that's the difference in the acreage to 125,000 now. And there was also the line, the Orange County line. So they bought up to that just about to the Orange County line up there. And that's now Mission Viejo, San Juan Capistrano, all of that area with the O'Neill family and the Forrester family and all of them living up there as well.
So it's San Diego County?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Barbara, how many miles of beach cover?
17 glorious miles of beach. And they are like holding on to that with talons, I'll tell you. It's beautiful. I can only imagine how many people want to get a hold of that beautiful coastline, but no way, they're not going to get it.
We also have an RV park there, so. Yeah, I parked my RV there, yeah, so because I had a Navy, really high up in the ranks of Navy, and they allowed military on the base to bring their
We
friends.
have one guest. Yep. We just shut a lot of tents on ours when people come to visit. That's how we do it. So
Are there areas on the beach where the Marines and their families are allowed to swim?
absolutely, we have a wonderful. It's actually called Del Mar Beach. It's quite swanky now. Used to be a little bit on. And there's also San Onofre. San Onofre is fantastic. That's the surfing culture capital right there, man. And it's yes, sir, it is. Yeah. So there's two different areas right there, and that's part of that 17 miles of pristine beach up there that you can also stay and visit on there as well if you have military access as well. So I know we were going to watch as the big. And we don't call them the boobies, but we kind of do.
Jeff Fox asked this question on his behalf.
Oh,
And he
okay.
wants to know whether we can go to the officers' club.
Whether you can go to the officers club up there? They really don't have one anymore. They really don't. So they kind of, but
Sorry,
if you need to have a quick little drink, we know we can hook you up on the face. We have a few little locations on there still. We have the 1795 club we can hook you up with from.
Barbara,
Okay.
thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much.